My name is Kay Byfield, and I'm coming to you from ArtSpeaks Studio in Dallas, Texas, where we offer online and in-studio courses in art, mostly watercolor. And this is your ArtSpeaks Studio Moment. Today we're going to talk about line, because line is one of the elements of design. The others are size, shape, value, color, texture, and space when we're talking about two-dimensional art. There is no line in three-dimensional art because lines in three-dimensional artworks would always have depth. So therefore, we could say that line is invented because there is nothing that is strictly two-dimensional in the world. Even a piece of paper has some depth to it, but we're only talking about the surfaces. And so from a philosophical point of view, line is invented. Like all the elements of design, line may not appear in every artwork. Each of the elements are used sometimes, but very rarely do you find all of the elements in any given piece of art. Line is the simplest of the elements of design because we can talk about line in terms of length and width and angle and things like that, whereas some of the other elements are much more complicated to talk about. And like all the other elements, at some point, line will become another element, or will be both line and another element. So for instance, at some point, line becomes texture, line becomes value, line becomes shape. All of the elements of design transition from one to the other. There are no firm lines, pun intended, between line and shape or line and value. That there is a continuum, and your judgment is where do those divisions occur. We can discuss line in terms of direction, evenness, thickness, length. We can also talk about line in terms of whether it is actual line or implied line. So let me give you some examples. So, for example, line can be thick. Line can be thin. Line can be long, or it can be short. You can have a continuous line, or you can have a broken line. That broken line would have an implied line between all the breaks. Implied lines can also include something that points. And so the implied line would be here or here. We can have a contour line. We can have hatched lines. We can have a cross contour line. And we can have what they call expressive line, where the line has variety in it, and so it stays interesting. In art, line can be used expressively, calligraphically, with cross-hatching, repetitively. We can use line many ways. Line is often used in the planning of artworks, and in fact, most artists begin planning their artworks using line, but the line may not show up or show up very prominently in the finished works of art. When it is used in the finished work of art, we can see it defining boundaries, we can see it adding interest, We can see it being used for texture, or we can see it being used in a way that creates value. Line can be very expressive, but it tends not to be used in anything but more abstract art. Because remember, line does not exist in nature. Because line is not used in nature, it is very often included in non-objective abstractions, meaning those works that have no reference to the outside world, no reference to nature. And while we may be able to find things in it, just as we can find imagery in the clouds or in a stain on your ceiling from a water leakage, there may not have ever been any interest in reflecting nature on the part of the artist. When line is used this way, it typically is very expressive. There can be some kind of variety to it, and it, because non-objective art is only about the elements of design, line is often used in this way. So in this work by Kristen Herzog, we see line used calligraphically. There are long lines and short lines. They vary in width. They're broken, and in some places they become textural. The color changes. And again, the goal here is just for the pleasure of the eye and to cause you to look around the painting to see all the different facets of it. One of the most frequent ways that we see line being used is in drawings. And some of the drawings, like this sketchbook drawing by James Herzog, are drawn on location, and the line is used to define the boundaries of the different shapes and forms and to provide some texture. So the line was done in ink, then he went back with watercolor and filled in the colors to record what he was seeing on the street while he was there. It's a very immediate response to the experience, and it's much more expressive than what a photograph would be. Early on, Alex Powers painted figures, particularly portraits, in a very loose, splashy style of paint. But at a certain point, he decided to let his calligraphic roots, his drawing experience, he drew beautifully, and drawing was what brought him into the art world. He decided to just dispense with the pretense of creating a painting that was about shapes and colors so much and focus more on the drawing. And so what we see in his paintings, especially his later work, we see drawings particularly done on location, as this demonstration was done, and they're portraits of people. There's a lot of charcoal, which is known as a drawing tool, and the paint is muted typically, color is limited, but there's also some line work in the paint. So he's going for texture, and he's going for line and muted color. And the paintings tend to be more emotional. They don't record exactly, they don't document the look of the person so much as record his feeling at the time that he was creating the painting. This painting has a loose underpainting, and then she went over the top of it using lines to create the shapes. It's called entanglement. A lot of the imagery she's using recall art from the 19th century, especially in books, illustrations, things like that. And they're very fanciful shapes all crowded into this space. It looks almost like a puzzle being put back together. And line is an essential element in this painting. And what you can see is when she gets to the face and the shoulders and part of the arms, she does give a sense of form, of the figure of the woman that is more naturalistic. But as you move away from there, the colors are arbitrary and the shapes are just jumbled together and done linearly. So this is a fairly abstract presentation that relies on line. Knowing how to draw and being able to draw as you design your artworks or even do your artworks can be very, very helpful to artists. Again, I say line is not essential, but it is widely used, particularly in the planning of art. You may not see it very much. You may only see the remnants of the original drawing underneath a painting, which can actually add to the painting, or you may not actually see the drawing itself. But artists use drawing. It's a fundamental skill of art, but again, it is not essential for every artist to be able to draw. I hope this information is helpful to you and that you will join us again in a future ArtSpeaks Studio Moment. And in the meantime, I wish you happy painting. Bye.